The shift doesn't start with chaos. It starts quietly. A truck doesn't arrive on time. A shipment gets delayed by a day, maybe two. At first, nothing feels serious. You walk into a store and everything looks mostly normal. Lights on, shelves stocked, people moving like they always do. But then you notice small changes. One section looks thinner. Another has gaps where there shouldn't be any. In the first 72 hours, it doesn't feel like a crisis. It feels like inconvenience. You adjust. You pick alternatives. You assume things will stabilize. Prices might tick up slightly. A few items are missing. But overall, life continues. Then week 3 arrives. The same shelves that had small gaps are now consistently empty. The substitutes are gone too. The price tags have changed. Not dramatically, but enough to notice. And more importantly, routines begin to break. Meals aren't as predictable. Shopping takes longer. Decisions feel heavier. And here's the part that most people misunderstand. The foods people compete for in those moments aren't luxury items. They're not rare ingredients. They're not specialty goods. They're the things people rely on every single day without thinking about it. We've seen this pattern repeat across different disruptions, different regions, different causes, but the outcome is consistent. The same types of foods disappear first. The same behaviors show up again and again. The households that stay calm plan differently. They don't prepare based on fear. They prepare based on patterns. Most households prepare for comfort, not duration. And that difference only becomes visible when systems stay strained longer than expected. To understand why certain foods get prioritized under pressure, you have to look at how people actually live day to day. Not what they say they'll do in a crisis, but what they already depend on. The first factor is reliance. Some foods sit at the center of daily routines. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. They are used without planning. When something interrupts supply, even slightly, demand doesn't just increase, it spikes immediately. Then there's turnover. Foods that move quickly through stores are restocked frequently. That means there's very little buffer behind the shelf. When deliveries slow down, even briefly, the gap shows fast. Another factor is backup availability. Some foods have easy substitutes, others don't. When people sense uncertainty, they move toward items that feel dependable. That creates pressure on specific categories, not the entire store. And then there's habit. People don't change how they eat overnight. They try to maintain normal routines for as long as possible. That means they don't suddenly become strategic buyers. They double down on what they already use. Once you understand those 4 drivers, reliance, turnover, backup availability, and habit, you can start to predict what disappears first. And more importantly, you can prepare in a way that aligns with reality, not assumptions. Based on that pattern, there are 10 foods that people consistently move toward when shelves begin to thin out. Not because they're rare, but because they sit at the center of daily life and become harder to replace once supply tightens. The first is bread. Bread is one of the fastest moving items in any store. It's produced daily, delivered constantly, and sold quickly. There's no deep reserve sitting in storage. When supply slows even slightly, the shelf clears within hours. Bread solves immediate calorie needs. It requires no preparation. That makes it one of the first things people reach for when uncertainty starts to build. Then there's milk. Milk depends entirely on continuous logistics. It's perishable, temperature sensitive, and restocked frequently. When transport is disrupted or demand increases, it disappears quickly. For many households, milk supports children, breakfast routines, and basic nutrition. When it's gone, the impact is immediate and noticeable. Eggs follow the same pattern. They seem simple, but they rely on consistent production and distribution. Eggs are versatile. They can be used across multiple meals. That makes them a high-demand item when people begin to prepare, even slightly. Once people start buying extra, supply struggles to keep up. That's the first wave, the foods people rely on without thinking. Once those begin to disappear, behavior shifts. People start looking beyond the next few days. They start thinking in terms of weeks instead of meals. That's where the next group comes in. Rice is one of the first items people move toward. It's affordable, calorie-dense, and stores well. It becomes a default option when people start preparing for a longer disruption. Rice doesn't just fill space in storage. It provides a stable base for meals. And once demand increases, it tends to stay unavailable longer because restocking large quantities takes time. Pasta follows closely behind. It's simple, familiar, and easy to prepare. Like rice, it supports multiple meals. It doesn't require refrigeration. That makes it a reliable choice when people want something that lasts but still fits into normal eating habits. When pasta disappears, it creates a noticeable gap in everyday meal options. Beans come next. Whether dry or canned, beans provide both protein and calories. That combination is difficult to replace affordably. As conditions extend beyond a few days, people begin to prioritize nutrition alongside calories. Beans become essential in that shift, and once they're gone, there aren't many alternatives that offer the same balance. Then there's cooking oil. This one often gets overlooked early, but demand rises quickly once people start thinking long-term. Oil adds calories. It makes other foods usable. It improves cooking flexibility. Without it, many basic meals become harder to prepare. Because it has a longer shelf life, people tend to buy it in larger quantities when they sense disruption. That creates a sudden surge in demand that empties shelves quickly. That's the second wave. Foods that support longer duration and flexible cooking. And then comes the final group, the ones most people don't think about until they actually need them. Salt is one of them. It doesn't seem urgent at first, but salt is critical for both flavor and food preservation. Without it, stored food becomes less effective and less usable over time. Supply is usually steady, but most households don't keep large amounts on hand. That means demand can outpace availability quickly. Flour is another. When people shift from buying prepared food to making it themselves, flour becomes essential. It allows households to create basic meals, stretch ingredients, and maintain some level of normal routine. But flour depends on processing, packaging, and distribution systems. When those slow down, availability drops. And then there's sugar. Sugar plays multiple roles. It provides quick energy. It supports baking. It helps preserve certain foods. As routines shift and people start adapting, sugar becomes more valuable than expected. Like salt, it's often understocked at the household level, which creates pressure when demand rises. That completes the 10. Each of these foods serves a different function, but they all share a common characteristic. They become difficult to replace once they're gone. And that leads to the most important insight. The real risk isn't just that something runs out. It's that you can't replace it when you need to. Most people think in terms of storage. They ask how long something will last, but duration alone doesn't solve the problem, because eventually everything runs out. What matters is what happens after that. If a food is hard to produce locally, hard to substitute, or dependent on complex systems, it becomes high risk during disruption. That's what makes something truly valuable over time. Not just shelf life, but replacement difficulty. Once you start thinking that way, your approach changes. You stop focusing on what looks impressive, and you start focusing on what actually supports stability. One of the most common mistakes people make is preparing based on what feels useful instead of what disappears first. They buy items that seem practical in theory, but don't match how they actually live. They focus on specialty foods, long-term kits, or things they don't normally use. But when conditions shift, they find themselves unable to maintain normal routines, not because they don't have food, but because they don't have the right food. They have calories, but no structure. And that's where stress begins to build. Because preparation isn't just about having enough to eat. It's about being able to function in a way that feels stable. That's where cost and value come into play. Not just the total price of what you store, but the return you get from it. Foods like rice and beans offer strong value because they provide both calories and flexibility. They can be used in multiple ways. They store efficiently. They support other ingredients. Cooking oil, even in small amounts, extends meals and increases usability. Flour allows you to shift from dependence to production. It gives you the ability to create food instead of waiting for it to be available. The goal isn't to spend more. It's to get more function from what you already have, and to build overlap, so that if one item becomes unavailable, another can take its place. But even the right foods can fail if they're not stored properly. Storage is where many plans break down. Heat shortens shelf life. In warmer climates, oils degrade faster. Dry goods lose quality. That reduces how long your food remains usable. Humidity creates another layer of risk. Grains, flour, and other dry goods can absorb moisture. That leads to spoilage over time. Pests are often overlooked. Without proper containers, stored food becomes vulnerable. Losses happen gradually, and often unnoticed until it's too late. Power disruptions affect refrigerated items. Freezers become unreliable. That shifts more pressure onto shelf-stable foods, and then there's rotation. Food needs to be used and replaced. Without rotation, even well-stocked supplies become unusable. Different environments require different approaches. In hotter regions, temperature control becomes a priority. In cooler regions, access during severe conditions becomes a factor. Preparation isn't fixed. It adapts to where you are. And as time passes, the situation continues to evolve. By week 3, the focus changes again. At that point, it's no longer just about what disappeared first. It's about what's left. Substitutes that worked in the early days begin to run out. Options narrow. Meals become simpler. Repetition increases. And simple foods take on greater value. A bag of rice becomes central. A bottle of oil becomes strategic. A basic ingredient becomes the difference between a complete meal and an incomplete one. This is where preparation shows its true value, not in the first few days, but in the ability to maintain stability over time. Because as conditions stretch, small gaps turn into larger problems, and small advantages become meaningful. This is also where mindset matters. Prepared households don't just have supplies. They have clarity. They don't rush. They don't overreact. They don't chase what's already gone. They adjust. They use what they have efficiently. They make decisions based on structure, not emotion. Preparation is not panic. It is positioning. And that changes how you move through uncertainty. So here's something to consider. Which of these foods would your household run out of first? Not what you have, but what you depend on, because that answer reveals more than any checklist ever could. In the end, this isn't about predicting events. It's about understanding patterns and positioning yourself ahead of them. Preparation removes uncertainty,